out their questions. I think when the movie came out, and that was quite some time ago, and I was actually getting trained in narrative approaches to therapy. And one of the techniques that is part of narrative approach is something called externalization. And externalization, the technique is works on this underlying principle that a lot of times people identify themselves as problems, and it is important to externalize the problem. It's important to highlight to people that they do not embody the problem. The problem is something outside of them. And sometimes problems look like I'm a jealous person, I'm an angry person, and that's a lot of personification of these um, emotions into who you are. And what externalization helps people do is look at emotions as external to them. And when I saw this movie, I was so excited because here is a movie that has, personified all these emotions, and they're actually showing how emotions make us, or in this case, make Riley do things. It's not really Riley who's, responsible for certain actions and decisions. It's actually the emotions that are making her do that. And that is such a powerful thing in therapy, when people realize they are not angry, it's just anger making them shout at people they love, or you know so the movie was great in that ways. And to revisit it right now, and I hope all of you all see Inside Out Part 2. That's even better. As for psychologists, it goes into really the ideas of what our core beliefs, and a lot of complex emotions. Anxiety. No, I was just trying to not give spoilers. Yeah. So that was my experience with the movie, and it's so beautifully shown and so correctly shown. So, and we'll be happy to answer any questions if you have.
Can I say something before you ask these questions? So for me, when I saw this movie long time back, but when I watched it again recently, before I watched part 2, I could relate to it a lot, even now. So what Riley goes through when she wants to run away, I feel that. Because I've come from a very city type place, I'm from Bangalore, and coming to Sonipat, where it's just my 2 cats, I have no family and friends here. Well, I have friends, but not like Bangalore friends. So, not Minnesota friends. So, I could relate with it so much. And during that moment now, you feel like that's the only solution you have. Just that emotions taking over and like being very impulsive and drastic. But then, because we've learned emotion regulation, when you actually try that, it actually definitely it works. So that concept is shown really well here in this movie. Thank you.
Hello, I just wanted to ask, to what extent do early childhood experiences shape our personality and emotional response? Like Arpita ma'am just said that it's very easy to look at emotions as our entire personality, and it's obviously easy because it's the experience of our entire life forms those kind of emotions. So, how accurate is the film's portrayal of core memories in terms of their lasting impact on our emotional development, and how, if in case our core memories are not that great, how do we influence them into like better memories?
I can answer the first part about the how important are the childhood memories in forming personality. Like you can see in the movie, Riley's core memories are based on her childhood memories, right? And we learn that in especially in psychoanalysis, we learn that a lot. And when it comes to like let's say in the particular episode, I'm sorry, the particular scene where Riley is sad, right? That she's moved and there's like her room is not set up and everything. Her mother says thank you, and we can keep smiling, right? Even though it's nice that the mother is appreciating, but the fact that she's not allowing the child to actually feel what she's supposed to feel. She's sad. It's okay to feel sad, but the mother is kind of influencing her expectation, what she wants from the child to be feeling. So that kind of makes a really big impact on the child. Like we are transferring our traumas to our children, right? So at that moment, that can influence the personality of, like, especially if you're an elder child, right? So you're expected to be responsible. You're expected to be all good and not show, like, be all selfless. So in this case, that is what is expected. So it does form a lot of your personality as well.
Honestly, I mean, I completely agree with the first part of your question that the childhood experiences that we have and the kind of relationships that we share form a core part of our memories. And a lot of the times, these memories also kind of get associated with each other, right? And over time, we kind of, tend to develop this perception of all bad, right? That our whole childhood was bad or our whole life was bad. And I think in narrative also we talk about single stories and multiple stories, right? So you also asked about modification of memories. So we don't really look at how these memories can be changed, but rather hold these memories and understand them more in detail to see that this is not just one version that exists or one story that exists, but there are multiple things that happen along with it, right? Like even in the movie we saw, okay, probably somebody lost a game and then we're feeling very sad, but on the same day there are also other things that make you feel joy, that make you feel excitement, etc. So it's really about how we hold all of these different memories and different emotions together as well, that kind of determine how we feel about different situations in our life.
Thank you so much.
I'll just say the question like this only. My question was, each person, if you see specifically the parents and Riley, the person who was heading their emotions was a different emotion altogether. So for Riley it was joy, for the mother it was sadness, and for the father it was anger. So what are your thoughts on this? Why do you think the directors would have picked this emotion for this parent or this person?
That's a good observation. Why do you think the director did that? And what does it say about the world that we live in and the society that we inhabit, where mothers are associated predominantly with one emotion? Throughout the movie, Professor Sara and I were discussing how sadness is the smartest. Maybe that's why the mother's predominant emotion is sad, because sadness was far more smart than other emotions. The father has predominantly anger. Running the show is kind of a sad commentary on, how gender stereotypical our view is of people. It's also sad to see that men are allowed to be more angry than women. I think it's also a commentary on how people's experiences vary, and that leads to uh, them feeling certain emotions more than others. The fact that the kid was predominated by joy was also a commentary on how less complicated uh, the life of young people is. I really like the end of the movie where the memory that's created is not a pure emotional memory but a mix of sadness and joy. Uh, and that's also something that comes as you grow up, where you learn to have two emotions coexist within you at the same time and being okay with that. That's my take on it.
We've seen from the movie how humor is like way of coping, right? And it's something a lot of us naturally or unconsciously do. So, how do you think humor as a defensive coping mechanism works, or how, what's the thinking behind it? Like, why would someone use humor to let go of something that's hurt them, or what do you think humor has in terms of benefits as like any other person jokes about their quote unquote trauma or unyielding. Okay, let's just joke about it. So, what do you think humor is?
Okay, this is my take. Okay, so I think first of all, comedy or humor is very important for us, and the reason why I think in movies also, like this movie, even though it had a lot of other elements like serious elements, they did show a lot of humor in it. And the reason why it's important is because otherwise we have a tendency to take ourselves very seriously. Like every part of our life, every single thing, let's say we got less marks than we wanted to get, or I didn't get the job that I wanted to get, or something. If I take everything seriously, then life doesn't not only becomes very complicated, but also it becomes very heavy, and it I won't be able to go from one moment to the other. Like life becomes very depressing in that sense, right? So I think that's why a lot of directors and stuff in movies, they have a tendency to show some of the scenes as light-hearted. Some obviously they do show ki these are important and we need to take it seriously, but some things which not all the time you need to take that seriously, right? So in our life also, at that moment we can't take it as a joke maybe, but after an hour or something we can take it as a joke, some things, right? So that's why we say ki we'll laugh at it in a few years, because we should be able to laugh at it, because if we don't, then that becomes part of our core memories, and we become not sad as a human being, but we become a darker version of sadness, I guess.
I had a question. Whatever happens, what they've shown us in Riley, in the HQ of Riley's mind, right? To some extent, is that what happens in our brains and minds?
What do you think? Were you able to kind of relate to what happened in the movie?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think to a large extent, because that's what we've been discussing as well, about how it's so much of an accurate portrayal as to how things go on in our mind. Of course, when you show it in a movie, you have to show it. You have to simplify certain things. You have to separate certain things and demarcate and distinguish between different emotions. In our minds, it's a lot more of a soup and a lot more complicated. But yeah, I mean, it is a very accurate portrayal in terms of the different simple and complex emotions that we have, the kind of core memories and experiences that we have, and how all of that kind of comes together to make our life what it is.
I just want to add, within the therapy circles, there's a saying that emotions come in group of threes. So a lot of time when I'm working with my clients, I am when they identify one emotion, this is what I sort of this is what I use to sort of nudge them into thinking about what else is there apart from the main emotion that they are noticing. Um, and things like Professor Purnima said, in the movie, things have really been simplified. Also because audience, right? The movie is meant to be watched by everyone, right? So, but in terms of real life lived realities, it's it's really a mix of everything, and for that I really suggest watching Inside Out 2. Please watch Inside Out 2.
Hi. Can you hear? Okay. Little bit louder.
Be a little loud.
Can you help the last line?
Mike is not doing anything.
So, when I see Joy, especially right at the start, I think two things. First, the fact that even when she doesn't understand what sadness means for everybody, she still won't leave sadness behind. She picks her up, takes her all along. And it's like Joy doesn't leave anybody behind. But also, I find Joy very selfish at certain points. Not maybe it's because Joy is also an 11-year-old, but at some points I do find her very, very selfish, where it's just like what I want must go. How do you think that works in real life and with other emotions as well?
I was actually going to ask you guys this, how would you think about Joy's character where she's constantly saying, like, if she sees all yellow, then it's a good day. If it's not yellow, then it's not a good day, right? And that's a perception. And when she touches, like, sadness is touching something or some other emotion is going, she's like, immediately she needs to make the room feel happy. Like, she kept on coming up with idea, like playing hockey or coming up with pizza or something. She needed to keep the room happy, Riley happy, family happy. Um, I don't know if you guys remember, but that kind of plays into cognitive distortions, where we think about I need to do this or I need to be this. If the day is all yellow, then the day is happy. If the day is not yellow, then it's an unsuccessful day. And I have failed as an emotion in the brain, right? For her. But in our day-to-day life, also we are somewhat like that. Even if you're having a bad day, I think we feel like we need to do something to make the day a good by the end of the day. So let's say I'm having a bad day. Maybe I'll eat an ice cream or something just so that I feel better by the end of the day, so that I can sleep better or watch a sitcom by the end of the day so that I feel like, okay, the day was not all bad. So in that sense, I think when you think about Joy, she is selfish, but her intent is not to actually harm anybody or hurt anybody. It's just her notion that if I can make everybody happy, then I'm successful. I think that's her take. Maybe that's why she's so selfish in that sense.
Just to add to that, so yeah, the first part of what you said, like joy goes along with different emotions, right? And that's how life is. It's very difficult to kind of just live with one emotion, and we carry different emotions. Joy can come with anxiety, joy can come with sadness. But I also noticed that part where joy can be selfish at some points in time, and how I looked at it was also how I can be selfish about joy, right? Like when we have difficult emotions, though we saw how protective it can be in different ways, we always tend to want to be happy or want joy. And we push everything else aside and chase joy or chase happiness, right? And it's always that single emotion that we are chasing despite all these emotions on this other side. We constantly keep pushing it away. And that's what I kind of felt when, joy seemed to be selfish and want to kind of move away alone. That's how we look at emotions ourselves as well.
I want to add one
things. So when I first watched the movie, when I was seeing Joy, and when sadness is touching the memories and she's making them blue and sad, I was kind of, when the first time I watched it, I was getting angry with sadness. I'm like, why is she doing this? How can she make things sad? But then when I watched it now, I'm kind of getting angry at Joy. I'm like, how can she not allow someone to feel the way that they're supposed to feel? You know, you need to vent out, you need to express your feelings. So I had completely two different emotions, and I felt that in myself. So,
I relate with that. The first time I saw the movie, I hated sadness. Yes, I get sadness, but why are you here ruining Riley's life? But then the second before, I think it's the fourth time I'm seeing the movie, and it's just, you know what? Sadness is not.
She's not the villain.
I think she's the best of them all. So patient. So patient.
So smart.
Yeah.
Has so many ideas.
It's the fourth time you're watching it. I think you should be here. Should we pull up a chair?
This is my first time watching the movie. My question was, how do you suggest parents help children to cope up with their emotions to reduce the generational gap between them? As we saw that parents are also equally responsible for children feeling bad. They did not consider Riley's feelings when they moved. So how do you suggest parents cope up with that?
I think if parents are good at coping up with their own emotions, that would really help. In more serious terms, I feel parents who are good at regulating their own emotions. I think in the movie there is one particular scene when the mother comes to tuck Riley in at night, right? And there's no joy in the headquarters and there's no sadness in the headquarters, right? So she's feeling all kinds of anger.
When the mother came, there was both of them were there. When the father came, they were.
Sorry, my bad. Okay, that's not really important. Also, I think what's important in that scene is the fact that because the mother appreciated her, accommodation, and because the mother was, we don't know, they've not shown what mother's emotional headquarter was looking like at that point, but at least outwardly the mother looked very regulated, right? And that really helped her at that point to be at peace with where she is, because earlier she had that moment of, I think there was a vehicle that passed by and she almost felt scared by the reflection of the headlight, right? That really regulated her. So in terms of how parents can help their kids or children is by being good at their emotions, I feel. Just knowing how to regulate them better. Yeah.
Just to add to that, I think parents can watch the movie themselves and then they can make their kids watch the movie as well, or just watch it together. But anyway, yeah, of course, parent self-regulation matters a lot, because kids are constantly watching parents as to how they are expressing their emotions, what emotions they are experiencing, and how they are regulating them. But also for parents to kind of help children understand that every emotion is okay to be felt, and it is important that every emotion is felt, and to validate that emotion for their child, because as we grow up, it's important for us to not feel like, oh, something's wrong with me because I'm feeling anger, or something's wrong with me because I'm feeling anxiety, but just to be able to acknowledge and accept that emotion, and then to be able to regulate it. So.
Hello. Yeah. Ma'am, you spoke about us identifying the difference between our emotions and our individual self, right? Like, for example, if we are jealous, we need to understand that we as a human being are not jealous. Like, it's the emotion that's driving us. But in most of the vulnerable cases, we are not designed in that way. So we can't understand. So what do you suggest? Like, how do we differentiate in those sort of situations? How do we tell ourselves that it's okay, it's not we, it's the emotions that are driving us?
Um, it's tough to do it by yourself. uh, One way to go about it is to take a step back and figure out what am I feeling, what am I going through, and naming what you're feeling is important, right? Naming the feeling. A lot of times, a lot people will continue saying, I'm angry, I'm angry, I'm angry, and you are calling yourself angry, right? So then it's very difficult to separate anger from yourself. What am I feeling? Anger. And what is anger making me do? So the way to do it yourself is to tell yourself, if what I'm feeling was a person, what would that look like? What would anger look like? I mean, Inside Out gives such great visuals for imagining your own anger or your own sadness. But I've had people who are even more creative. I feel everybody is really creative, and this is a very limited representation of what our emotions look like. So, naming the problem, naming the emotion, and then imagining it as a person and thinking what would they look like. Uh, how big or small would they be? How rough or smooth would they be? What color they are? What size they are? That helps disconnect yourself from the problematic emotion. And I'm very consciously using the word problematic emotion. My biggest problem with the movie is they externalize joy also. I feel joy should be something that people should still believe that it's them. And I'm a joyous person. And joy is not outside of me, right? Um, I think that helps, but I still feel it's very difficult to do it yourself, especially when you're sitting with that emotion. It's very difficult. I think when you're sitting with that emotion, you should sit with that emotion. Being with sadness really helps you get out of it. But if you keep resisting it, that's where it gets worse.
So we've talked about personal level, we've talked about interpersonal level, but like watching movies like Inside Out, or for me it would be Tamasha. Like you would watch it, and for the next few days you will have that surge of I just want to be myself. Did you just buy it? Nice. That's nice. Yeah. So how do you like? Sure, I want to engage with my emotions. I want to be expressive and understand them. But then it dies for a reason. After 7 days or after 3 days, if I'm feeling like I can't be myself, there is something wrong with how it is being taken. There is some influence of society, there is some influence of community. So to what extent can we see these movies and actually engage with them without feeling inauthentic to ourselves?
Can I ask you something? Why do you say that after a point you can't feel that
Because it feels like you're being judged for it. If I watch Tamasha, I want to dance. I'll do the cross the stage and then lie down just to go to whatever that scene was. I want to do that. But then 3 days, I want to do it that day. I want to do it the next day. But then after a point, I feel like, क्यों? क्योंकि लोग देखेंगे. वहाँ पे उस समय मजा है क्योंकि रणबीर कपूर कर रहा है. लेकिन मैं कैसे किस औकात से मैं जाके कर सकता हूँ?
Yeah, one thing that I want to say is that see, all emotions come, like they ebb and flow, right? So they're like waves. They'll come and they'll go. And the most utilitarian aspect of this quality is that the surety of emotion going away makes sure that we will get time to rest. Because emotions don't come alone, they bring train of thoughts as well, right? And that's a lot of work for our brains. And there's utility in emotions not lasting a long duration. The sad part, a little bit in my experiences, I've seen positive emotions go away faster. I feel negative emotions, sadness, shame, guilt, these last longer. They sometimes just build a tent and stay there till something's done to chuck them out. Uh, but and sometimes one emotion is sort of kicked off by another one. Like the example that you are talking about, it's almost like, you're excited, you're joyous, and then by the third day when it comes down, what's taken its place is shame. That people will judge me if I do something like this. But I'm hoping that shame would also wane off in some time, some days. And that's the smartness of our brains, I feel.
Because that's my point. Like, I know the emotion, that urge to do it still exists, but then shame takes on for so long that I have, like, if I happen to watch the movie, only then will that emotion come back.
So that's the power of movies.
Agreed.
That they can do
100%
that.
agreed.
Two, like you said, yes, there's a little bit of, it's also sad about the society that we're in, that a lot of judgment that we imbibe, or the way our society functions, it really allows negative emotions to seep in, trickle in much faster. And positive emotions really seem to be something that I have to pulled into the picture, earned, worked really hard for to achieve something. So, sad reality, I feel.
One last question.
Okay. So, you know how when Riley and when joy and sadness go off into the long-term memory, and then only discuss fear and anger are left behind in the headquarters, it becomes so dysfunctional. The headquarters, yeah. So, do you think this applies in everyday life as well? Do you think that with just these emotions, the individual is not going to be able to function at all?
Without joy and sadness.
Yeah.
I know that's what they've shown in the movie, and if to an extent I think that's true. No matter what happens at the end of the day, we need to feel somewhat happy, at least with some things, even if we're not happy with our life at that particular moment, we're not happy with the work, or we're not happy with some things. We should, or not should, at least we should try to feel happy about our life in general. Maybe like I can be thankful and happy about my parents or my friends. Like that should be there. And sadness also, like we've seen in the movie, very important, right? Unless we feel sadness and express and feel exactly what we're feeling, and letting it sink in, and letting us understand why are we feeling sad at this time. Like we were feeling happy just now. What is making us feel sad? There is something going on within us which is making us feel this way. So let's find that out, right? And only when we go to that particular part, then only we actually start to understand what is it that we really want in life. And when we get that, maybe we feel happy again, a different kind of happiness. So in that sense, I think the movie did justice in showing without the presence of sadness and joy, like we can become dysfunctional. Like that's what we try to do in therapy also. We're not trying to make them feel happy, but we're definitely trying to help them be contented with their life and expressive with their life. So
completely agree with that, because all emotions serve some kind of a protective function for us, right? And all emotions exist for a certain reason. And we still function when we don't experience certain emotions. Like something that you could also see was she was experiencing complete numbness at certain points as well. But life was going on. But things can get difficult because then you're kind of, disowning certain parts of yourself, disowning yourself from experiencing certain emotions, and that becomes a very fragmented identity. You're not able to live a complete life. You're not able to experience yourself as a whole, and that is when it becomes difficult, right? So even when we kind of say, okay, I'm not supposed to feel anger, or I'm not supposed to feel anxiety, you're cutting off a part of yourself, right? Which means yourself is not existing as a whole, and you're losing out on a lot of other things as well. And sometimes we also feel like, I don't want to experience all of these emotions. I only want to experience these emotions, but our brain unfortunately doesn't work like that, right? Like if you want to experience just joy, you'll have to experience the sadness along with it. So yeah, I mean, if we kind of are not able to authentically experience certain emotions, certain parts of our life automatically gets difficult.
Okay, thank you so much for that question, Tamara. We will have to wrap up now. Sorry. I really want to thank all of you for taking the time to come here on a weekend and enlightening us with all of these answers. And thank you so much for your presence. And thank you to all of you for being here. We're really glad to have hosted you, and we hope to see you at the next event. So thank you. Bye bye.